Welcome back to the 2025 APAICS Technology Summit. I'm Tanya Layden, Vice President of Development and External Affairs. Our next panel is Closing the Digital Divide, Broadband Infrastructure and Access. Broadband access is not just about connectivity. It's about safety, economic opportunity, and civic participation. Rising incidents of network vandalism have created large-scale outages affecting hospitals, schools, and public safety networks. This panel will explore the state of broadband infrastructure, the unique challenges facing rural and underserved communities, and policy solutions to ensure equitable access to reliable, high-speed internet. It is now my pleasure to introduce KPAC Chair and APAICS Board Member, Congresswoman Grace Meng. Congresswoman Meng represents New York's 6th Congressional District. She is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and a strong advocate for broadband access for the AA and NHPI community. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Meng.
Hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or CAPAC. I want to thank APAICS for convening their Tech Summit and bringing leaders together for this important conversation on broadband access and closing the digital divide. In today's economy, broadband is just as essential as electricity and water. Yet nearly 20% of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders lack access to high-speed internet, especially in rural areas and tribal communities. For example, American Samoa was known for having some of America's most expensive internet, and the Northern Mariana Islands has had fiber optic infrastructure damaged in storms, disconnecting tens of thousands of residents from internet services. This digital divide is hurting families and communities across the country. It means that seniors who are mobility impaired cannot access telehealth doctor appointments. It means that small businesses cannot compete in online marketplaces to expand their customer base. And it means that students can't finish their homework at home. As a mom of two, I know firsthand how crucial internet access is for learning. And it breaks my heart knowing that millions of kids are caught in this homework gap because they don't have reliable internet connectivity at home. That's why I was proud to lead a bill to expand wireless hotspots to close this gap. I also worked during the pandemic to provide discounted or free high-speed internet for low-income households at a time when we were all isolated at home. And I was proud to work on the bipartisan infrastructure law that established the Affordable Connectivity Program. This program provided a monthly $30 credit to over 23 million households, which saved them over $14 billion on internet and phone bills alone. Unfortunately, this vital lifeline expired last year, making reliable internet out of reach for millions of families. And now, the Federal Communications Commission is working to overturn a federal rule that allowed schools and libraries to use FCC funds to loan hotspots to students and educators. Let me be clear, access to high-speed internet is not a luxury. It is a necessity. In the 21st century, broadband infrastructure is essential for advancing your education, conducting business, and staying connected to your community. Congress must bring back the Affordable Connectivity Program and invest in our broadband infrastructure so that reliable, high-speed internet reaches every corner of our nation, from the islands of Hawaii to Queens, New York. I will continue fighting to ensure that every American, no matter where they live, has the same opportunities to learn, work, and succeed. Thank you.
Our moderator for this panel is Nguyen. Tu is the Executive Director of OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates. Please join me in welcoming Tu and the rest of our panelists.
Thank you, Tanya. It's always great to be here with APAICS for the Tech Summit every year. I'm super honored to be moderating this discussion today on digital equity with Representative Cindy Rue, who represents the 32nd Legislative District in Washington State in their House of Representatives, John Nakahata, Chair of HWG LLP, and Saul Hernandez, Vice President of Government Affairs at Charter. You can find all of their bios in the program provided. So we're just going to head straight into the conversation because I think there's a lot of things to catch up on since last year's Tech Summit as it relates to everything happening in the digital equity world. But just to level set and start off, I just want to go around the room here and ask everybody, what does digital equity in America look like to you? Saul, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, too. And it's a pleasure to be here with APAICS and with Representative Rue and with John. Just an honor to be with all of you. Great question, and thank you so much for asking. It's critical from our perspective here at Charter, and I think in the telecommunications industry writ large, that everybody, regardless of zip code, geography, or where they live, have access to robust and reliable high-speed broadband. Here at Charter, we're the fastest growing rural provider, as we've seen over the last decade and several years that, rural America are often more difficult to connect. And Charter is committed to building out to those hard to reach areas because it is so critical that we play our role in closing the digital divide once and for all.
Representative Rue, what about you?
Yes, thank you. So happy to be here with you. So digital equity to me looks like whether you are a native English speaker or not, whether you have disability or not, or even the economic class or affordability that your class that you're in, that you will absolutely have access to digital communications, access to services, and just being part of life that we are living in the 21st century.
Thank you. John, anything to add to that picture?
No, they've covered it very well. I mean, very simply, I'd say people who want and need broadband can get it, right? And can know how to use it. That's fundamental to being part of our modern society. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been involved in broadband since broadband policy started. And it grows on trying to create universal telephone networks, but now we need universal broadband communication networks available to everybody.
So from each of your perspectives, because you work at Charter in the private sector, Representative Rue, you're in government, and John, like you said, you've been in and out of all the different aspects of broadband, like policy making and the industry. What are currently the biggest challenges to broadband access? Anyone can start here.
So I know your company is working really hard on getting broadband, the infrastructure rolled out, especially in the next 5 years. I think going forward, it will be definitely affordability. And of course, the operation of the systems that ISPs, the internet service providers, will be laying out very vigorously over the next 5 years. But definitely, it will be affordability.
Yeah, and thank you, Representative Rue. And from our perspective, we face significant regulatory burdens both at the federal and state and even the municipal levels that can often hinder our quick deployment of high-speed broadband networks. So we deal with something called pole attachments, where we have to put our lines on each utility pole. And as we were talking about previously, building out to rural areas, the houses are often, spread out, requiring significant infrastructure, both on the line that we have to attach to the pole and the number of poles that we have to attach to. We also have to, and are increasingly dealing with railroad crossings and rights of way, having to get permission in order to cross railroad tracks in order to deploy high-speed broadband to areas that we are building out to. Digital literacy and relevancy, and that's something that John mentioned earlier, is really, really important. People will not use it if they will not use high-speed broadband if it is not relevant, and also if they are not familiar with how to use it as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we provide grants, equipment, computers, tablets, etc., to community centers across the country, and we also provide the training and upskilling they need to participate, effectively in the online world. And Representative Rue, I think you said it best. Affordability is a very, very key factor to adoption. And at Charter, we offer high-speed broadband across our footprint, but we also offer and have for many, many years a program called Spectrum Internet Assist that provides $15 per month high-speed broadband connectivity for households that qualify without any data caps, without any contracts. And so we have had a great response and reception to Spectrum Internet Assist, and we're thrilled that we're providing all sorts of opportunities for all of the households and businesses in our footprint to take advantage of our really high quality service.
I think Representative Rue and Saul have both covered a lot of the major issues, which I'd say deployment and operations, affordability, which, the share of, there's a great study by Brown Group that shows the share of household income going to broadband really increases as you get to the lower half of median household incomes. And obviously goes up a lot as you get down, into the bottom of that. And then digital liberty and safety, as Saul has just said. I think the other big challenge is funding. So we have the BEAD program right now, which was passed in 2023, $42 billion for deployment. We'll see how much of that actually gets authorized to get used in the current administration, which is the cutting back on the flexibility to use it for things other than kind of first line deployment. Operational costs are continue to go on, and we need to be supported in a lot of rural areas. The FCC has a universal service program that's about $8.5 billion a year. Thankfully, that just survived a Supreme Court challenge to its existence this past June. And so, but that's there are ongoing challenges to that as well. So funding for all of these things is going to be a significant challenge over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, John, for mentioning the BEAD program and the infrastructure bill. As part of that, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, also created these broadband maps, which are publicly available, where you can check for internet coverage for any location in the U.S., and then it'll show if that location is provided broadband service by satellite, fiber, and or wireless. And so something that we've been noticing is that a community, an area can be shown as covered on the map, yet residents can't get a reliable connection at home. And so how do we bridge this gap, or how do we explain this gap, or and fix the gap between the official data on the FCC broadband maps and people's real life experiences? Representative Rue, I think, do you want to start with that one?
I can start with that. Unfortunately, this administration took our eyes off of fiber in this once-in-a-lifetime investment via the BEAD program in June with the benefit of the bargain, and which is unfortunate because I believe fiber is the most reliable and, going forward, most affordable form of providing internet service to everyone. For that gap, I would suggest that you work with your own state broadband office to update your maps, do your speed tests, look at your ongoing investments needed on affordability of alternate technologies such as satellite and fixed wireless, in addition to seeking future funding of digital navigators.
I know you mentioned fiber, Representative Rue, but I also want to acknowledge that, like Saul, you said, out in the rural areas can be harder to, it can be more expensive. And so how else can reliable coverage be provided to both folks in those rural areas? But also we know that folks in dense urban areas who are living in places with outdated infrastructure, it can be difficult as well. So can Saul or John, you speak to how perhaps we can provide more reliable coverage for those folks?
Sure. I'm just from a charter perspective happy to. As I mentioned, we are always aggressively building out our networks and always seeking to connect as many businesses and households as possible, regardless of where they live or work. Also, I think, importantly, we are investing billions of dollars a year of private money, continue to innovate and improve the network. So in addition to build out, we're also upgrading our existing infrastructure that we have deployed to households and businesses across the country throughout our footprint to deliver, multi-gigabit speeds and, the best experience possible that has sort of allowed all of our customers to make the greatest and best use of our high-speed broadband. And, that was particularly highlighted through COVID when overnight, the entire country was forced sort of to work from home. And it was a great success story, I think, of Charter, specifically in the industry at large, that we had been planning and building in redundancies to the network and building in additional capacity that could be easily converted and extended to our customer base when they needed it most, and enable them to work from home, to go to school from home, to run businesses, and so on. And so, that is one piece that I think is really important, is that just we are always iterating and improving upon our existing plan while simultaneously building out to those areas that are currently not served by fixed broadband within our footprint. With regard to the maps, they've been helpful in directing that limited, as Representative Rue indicated, it was a once in a lifetime sort of funding opportunity, and the maps were helpful in trying to direct it to those who needed it. We here at Charter and others in the industry have worked really hard with the FCC to try to update those maps to ensure, to Representative Rue's point, that they are as accurate as possible, so we know where service exists and, more importantly, where it does not. It's not always easy, but there's always ongoing build out occurring, and so trying to work through the FCC and their channels to make sure those maps are as accurate as possible is something that we at Charter have put a real priority on. But at the end of the day, I think the maps are an important tool, particularly as they continue to be, their accuracy continues to be improved, because they enable states and providers to make sure that they are accurate. So again, those limited funds are able to be directed, most importantly, to those truly unserved areas.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing with respect to the maps, I mean, the current maps were actually legislated by Congress because of Congress's frustration with the prior maps. No map is going to ever be perfect. I think the important thing with the maps is that you can, especially for local officials and people and interested groups, is to continue to work to see where the flaws in them are and to point them out. They're never going to work for everywhere. I mean, and trying to model, someplace up in the mountains or in Alaska or in Hawaii is going to be different than modeling, someplace close, like in a suburb or something like that. So there are always going to be flaws in the maps. In terms of the technology, look, I mean, I think in terms of, it depends on what you're trying to achieve the technologies to. Getting broadband to homes, there's got to be an array of technologies. Some of the rural areas probably are going to end up being best served by satellite if you're talking about trying to get to somebody's home. But if you're trying to connect a whole community, that may be a different question. And that remains to be seen, how much capacity could be done by satellites. But if you have a small town with health clinics and schools and local government and businesses, how much capacity is going to be? They're going to need more capacity, and that I think that's the type of thing, and that those needs will continue to grow over time. That's the type of thing where terrestrial networks are oftentimes more reliable, and by the way, also would be the backbone of your mobile wireless networks, which they need. Mobile wireless networks need fiber connections to be able to operate in the current technology.
Right. So also on top of the fiber build out is that we continue just innovate in the satellite and build out of 5G wireless as well. Thank you all for sharing and updating us on where we stand with BEAD and the maps. And it's great to hear like Charter's, private sector's investment in build out as well, right? Just to get people connected. So even though the government may not be as invested at this point in time, but that Charter is still making those investments in your network. There's another issue in the digital world that I've been hearing about, network vandalism. Can you help our audience understand what exactly that means or looks like? And what is the urgency to address this problem? So, Saul, can you help define what network vandalism yet, and then how it's impacting charter?
Sure, absolutely. And importantly, and I know Representative Rue is a real leader in this area, and I am grateful for her interest in this space. Network vandalism is a serious and growing issue in all parts of the country. Our infrastructure are part of critical communications infrastructure writ large, and it's a key component, our systems and others, to the interconnected systems that we all rely on. So whether that be for hospital systems or for emergency services, anytime you dial 911 for fire, EMS, or police, all of that is interconnected to the critical communications infrastructure that Charter helps to operate. And so any impact to that is not just an inconvenience to businesses or households, but can present serious public safety concerns. And so what it is, just from a 30,000 foot level, is, nefarious actors will, in search of copper, which has a very high value as a commodity, individuals or groups of individuals will go and attempt to gain access to that copper by physically cutting communications lines that run along those poles that we had talked about previously. And so when that happens, it causes network outages, not just for me, who's, trying to, watch television on the Spectrum News app, but also causes significant outages for navigation systems, electrical transmission lines, air traffic control at airports. Again, emergency services, 911, police, fire, and EMS can cause banking outages and can cause businesses who increasingly operate in the digital economy to not be able to transact payment. And so it has a serious and sort of snowball effect that from top to bottom causes, one, instability, two, the inability for first responders to respond, and can really bring down, entire systems that the greater public at large rely on. And so I have more to add to that, but would love for Representative Rue's thoughts in this regard, and perhaps I could follow up afterward.
Absolutely. That is a huge problem. Saul described it quite well. It's impacting not just communications, but also our transportation system, as well as power, electricity. And so theft and vandalism of critical infrastructure is what I'm calling the bill that I'm working on. And unfortunately, each cut, they might be getting a few $100s, few $1,000s per haul, but it is very dangerous for the thieves, number one, because they might be cutting into live wires. Number two, each vandalism or theft causes hundreds of thousands of dollars of direct costs of repairs, or even $500,000. And that's on besides all the opportunity costs that we have of people not being able to access their work or school, or even just to communicate critical communications. And so they're not cutting just copper wires either. They're also cutting fiber, optic fiber, which is really not worth anything. So tongue in cheek, what I say is we need to teach the thieves which wires not to cut, because it's not worth their time, and yet it causes so much cost and trouble. And those are all passed on to ratepayers and to consumers. So if we're complaining about inflation right now, or cost of living, which disproportionately impacts rural Americans, as well as, of course, people of color, communities of color, this is one of the issues that's adding to that burden.
And just too, if it's okay to follow up on Representative Rue's point, she's exactly right. In a 6-month period alone, there were almost 6,000 intentional incidents of theft and vandalism to critical communications infrastructure. That's more than 800 a month in that 6-month period that I referenced. It impacted, just from Charter's perspective, almost 2 million customers. And as the representative said, these aren't random acts. They are, really deliberate assaults that in search of copper. And Representative Rue made a very good point. None of Charter's lines contain copper, but as she mentioned, they don't know what they're looking for, and are sort of indiscriminately cutting these lines. And in cutting into a fiber optic cable, perhaps that was the property and responsibility of Charter. Not only are they not getting anything for that, but they are also disrupting those 911 systems that I mentioned, banking systems, healthcare facilities, and their ability to communicate both internally and externally, impacting law enforcement and even U.S. military bases. So it really is a very, very serious issue. And, there have been several states, Minnesota being one of them, that have enacted or introduced legislation to address the issue. We're grateful for Representative Rue's leadership in Washington to address this issue at a state level. And also, I should mention, at the federal level, in the House, there's a bipartisan bill that was introduced by Representatives Laura Lee from Florida and Mark Vesey from Texas, called the Stopping Theft and Destruction of Broadband Act, that would criminalize this behavior at the federal level. And I should mention there are similar efforts to introduce companion legislation in the U.S. Senate as well. But Representative Rue, we are grateful for your interest and your leadership. It is just so important, and an issue that not a lot of people know about, and is not necessarily top of mind, but it is an issue that impacts everybody, regardless of where you work or live.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing more about this issue. As you were explaining it, Saul, I've been keeping track of broadband and innovation. And so I was like, isn't everybody updating their networks from copper to fiber? But so that's exactly the point, is that people are going around cutting wires now that are now fiber, thinking that it's still copper. And then to your point, Representative Rue, that they could be cutting also like live electrical wires as well. That's not quite safe. So thank you both for your work. And it just shows also the continued investments that companies like Charter have to make in the networks that you're building out, not only to build out, but also to upkeep due to these damages. So actually, this all kind of leads back to some of the barriers and obstacles to digital equity you were talking about earlier in terms of affordability. Literacy was also mentioned. And so I wanted to ask, maybe let's start with John. What are some initiatives that you're seeing from private and public sectors to address barriers to digital equity right now?
And as I said earlier, unfortunately, we're sort of in an era retrenchment at the federal level. So we had the Affordable Connectivity Program that addressed low-income affordability pretty effectively. I mean, it's pretty well documented to have increased the amount of broadband penetration, particularly in rural areas, but also in urban areas. So we had that. We've got deployment assistance. We've got, obviously the types of things that Saul and Representative Rue have been talking about are a good example of why continuing operating costs, particularly in higher cost areas, need to continue to get addressed. In terms of initiatives, I would say a lot of them at this point, I think, are more local. And they've got to be. I mean, it's just not going to come from the federal level, and language assistance is from the federal government across the board. So, you're not, if you're trying to address language minority communities, that's going to have to be really have to be a local effort. Certainly, the industry working with groups like OCA, which they've done for a long time, Charter and others, the work in community partnerships is going to be, I think, is going to continue to be critical. Some innovations like working with, and this has been going on for a while, but working with people who are developing low-income housing to make sure that the broadband is getting built into the low-income housing. Things like that are also, I think, more effective and more targeted local initiatives. There's a pretty good report out by Benton, that's sort of by the Benton Foundation, which I think kind of categorizes a bunch of different kind of initiatives at state and local levels so that people can pursue. And that's got, I think, the kind of principal area where you can expect improvement to really be targeted over the next few years, as we're sort of seeing the federal government pull back. So.
Yeah, to your point, John, I know, for example, I'm from Houston originally, and our Houston public library system actually has been growing their program where you can check out hotspots for folks who are living in areas where they don't have reliable internet access. And that's just one of the local initiatives that they've been trying to use to address the digital divide. But not a lot of people know about it. Like, you can go to the Houston Public Library and check out a hotspot there. How about Saul or Representative Rue? Anything to add there?
Actually, let me just jump in on that one. Just so that was an initiative created by the last administration at the FCC, funded by the Universal Service Program, and it is probably now being axed. So it's another example of sort of one step forward, one step back. So.
And I just to build on that, I mean, we have, I think, importantly, and to add on to John's point, and two, you mentioned, the program at the Houston Library. Our customers are able to access over 47 million Wi-Fi access points when they are away from their home or away from work in order to gain access to our high-speed broadband network with, the built-in security of that network. So it's not, accessing a public Wi-Fi hotspot like, we see at airports or train stations or libraries or that sort of thing, but a charter Wi-Fi access point that you have the benefit of knowing has that built-in security, has access to, to the true high-speed broadband networks. So the end user, would experience no operational difference from their experience when they're sitting at home or their business to when they are out and connected to one of those 47 million access points. And I just to talk about some of the public-private partnerships, et cetera. I'm incredibly proud to work at Charter, and I think that we have proven to be great partners in the communities that we serve. We have a lot of programs that are based and anchored in our communities. We work on sort of a connectivity by design, from a connectivity by design perspective. You had mentioned with new builds and that kind of thing. We want to make sure that we are thinking about sort of bookending and making sure that from the ground up, the access to high-speed broadband is fully integrated into any plans that are being put together to build out new housing. Just our internal Charter-specific programs. We have Community Center Assist, which I mentioned earlier, laptops, tablets, connectivity to those community centers, training programs to improve digital literacy. And we have the Spectrum Digital Education Program, Spectrum Scholars. We have the Spectrum Community Investment Loan Fund program called Spectrum Smart Devices for Seniors. So, it is really a prerogative of Charter to actively work in the communities that we serve to ensure that they have the resources that they need to thrive.
Yeah. Saul mentioned that need for, and John as well, that need for public, private, and tribal and anchor institution partnerships. That's absolutely going to be even more crucial as we go forward. And of course, also the digital devices, affordable digital devices. And so we have actually passed a right to repair digital devices in Washington state. And I know other states are working on that. Obviously, we need a lot more digital navigators and, of course, cybersecurity so people have confidence that they may access broadband without fear that their private information will be stolen.
Low-income population has a hard time navigating the system to be able to get the assistance that's needed, and that's true on the digital side as much as it is any place else, right? And you got to be able to feel safe using the tools, right? I mean, that's really important with privacy and cybersecurity.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the era of phone scams, right? People getting phone calls and being scammed is now transitioning into this digital world where we know that, you get scam emails. And I think in the Asian American community in particular, we're starting to see that happen on like Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp. Like when people have access to broadband, the internet, and these apps, the scammers do too. That's part of the fear too, right? Not only just the privacy of data, but then also their safety, financial and other safety as well as part of literacy. So thank you for sharing those initiatives and the concerns. Looking ahead, what innovations or policy changes give you hope for building more reliable and equitable broadband access for all communities. This is to wrap us up and maybe have a more hopeful outlook on digital equity right now. Let's start with you, Representative Ru.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to a future administration that will allow us to get the digital equity grant. We actually got $16 million in the bank. Unfortunately, it was taken back, and we were planning on using that to secure access training of the users, like digital navigators. And so my glass half full outlook is that AI's growing role in the energy sector, just like that, because they are looking at optimizing the grid flow of integrating renewables and enhancing efficiencies to modernize one of our most critical infrastructures of electricity. And of course, that will also create an energy system that is smarter, more resilient, and more responsive to our community's needs. And so I'm hoping that, and of course, as quantum becomes real, more real, we actually have one of the manufacturers here right in Washington State, within half an hour of my home, actually. So I am looking forward to using cases like this, maybe to justify, hopefully, another BEAD-like funding cycle in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Saul?
Sure. Well, as Representative Ru mentioned, there is a lot of work going on at both the federal and state levels. I think, we're waiting to see how all of that comes out. But in the interim, we at Charter always put customers first. And our goal is, as I've mentioned throughout our conversation, is to ensure that we have ubiquitous connectivity, irrespective of zip code or geography. And so our number one goal is to continue to connect more to our credible high-speed network. As I mentioned, we're always working to improve upon the existing network by rolling out symmetrical gigabit speeds across the network, which are going to allow folks to take advantage of new and emerging technologies, some that exist now and some that don't yet exist but will exist in the future. We just want to make sure that we future-proof the network now by, as I said earlier, sort of having innovation be a key driver of our design. And so, one thing that I would just mention on the consumer front is that we put in place about a year ago a first in industry consumer commitment. That we provide credits if they're to customers if they're experiencing outages. We have a 100% U.S.-based customer service workforce that's available 24/7. Technicians, if there's an issue with service, are available to come to your home or business that same day or at the latest the following day. And we have money back guarantees. We have no contracts, no data caps, that kind of thing. And so always just trying, as I said, lots of things going on policy wise, but that does not cloud our main goal, which is our customer first experience and trying to deliver, the best service possible with the highest customer satisfaction possible. And the last thing I'll mention is something that we're really proud of is that Charter is the fastest growing mobile network provider in the country. We've got more than 10 million customers at present, and that number is continuing to grow by the day. So, we are able to provide our customers, both when they're at their home or at their business and connected to our high-speed broadband network, that same experience when they are traveling or out of their home by, this really incredible mobile network offering that we're really, really proud of.
Thank you, Saul. And thanks for sharing about that, the mobile network and the Wi-Fi network out of home. I think that's the first time I've heard about that. So that's really cool to know. John, what about you?
So then on a hopeful note, look, I think the pace of technological change and technological innovation is continuing to just race ahead, right? When I started in this in the late 90s, it was, people were thrilled to get a megabyte speed delivery. Now we're talking gigabytes of speed delivery, 1,000 times faster than that. Rural areas, satellite is going to help rural broadband, right? Satellite broadband is going to help some people in rural areas that are just going to be in areas that are really, really difficult to reach. And you can get a cell phone call, partly through combinations of satellite and terrestrial networks, out in really, really remote areas that you couldn't get it before. All that stuff's going to help drive it. More people are, there are in the lower income, mobile has been the biggest source of connectivity, both voice and data, in the lowest, and it's been growing in the lowest, tranche of income. I think it's almost a quarter of people are smartphone only, which, it'd be better if they could have it, I think, at home and mobile, but maybe they don't need it, right? I mean, so you don't want to be paternalistic about that either. The last thing I would say is that, so all of that is really hopeful. And I think the other thing is AI. A lot of times there's talk about all the problems with AI, and certainly there are, but it's also going to, I think, open up other areas of benefits, and particularly for language minority, for example, things that can be automatically translated and things like that will be helpful. Today you can get captions on a lot of things that like the Zoom calls or something like that, and if you are hearing impaired, that's a big benefit. So AI is going to be a problem, and AI is also going to be a solution to various things that we have. So that's the optimistic side, is the technology is continuing to improve, services will continue to improve, innovative services, whether you're Charter or many other companies, are continue to be delivered. The challenge we've been talking about is really how do we make sure that can spread across everybody.
Absolutely. And I think that just brings us home back to just the partnerships that we have between government, private, and public sector. Like, for example, OCA works with Charter actually on seniors and digital devices in Cantonese and Mandarin for our Chinese seniors in New York and LA and cities like that. But then also making sure that we work with government for things like USF reform. Looking forward to the day that comes back into the picture. But this is actually the end of our time. I know we can spend a few more sessions of this just going into just like pole attachments or USF reform itself and what that could look like. But I think APAICS will just have to invite us back for another panel on that. Thank you all so much for your time. To the audience, I hope you've learned a little bit of something new, whether that is about network vandalism or what's happening in build out. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next Tech Summit.
Wow. Today's discussions covered topics such as the importance of financial literacy, upskilling in the digital economy, exploring the future of streaming, and pathways to close the digital divide. I hope you can agree with me that day one of the APAICS Tech Summit was full of learning and meaningful discussions. Once again, I want to thank our incredible summit partners, Amazon, Apple, AT&T, Charter, Citi, Coinbase, Comcast, CTIA, Dell, DoorDash, Fathom, Gates Foundation, Google, Lyft, MasterCard, Microsoft, Netflix, Nielsen, TikTok, and Visa. Please make sure to visit our website at apaics.org to learn more about our work. Thank you all for being a part of this year's Tech Summit, and I look forward to continuing these important conversations tomorrow for day 2.